I'm sorry to say that maybe it's not a matter how difficult we can find good books, but more of not having many good adolescent books in Arabic in the first place. Um, I have to acknowledge that the abundance of good novels for adults or of good picture books uh, is there in the Arab world, but I'm afraid I can't say the same about middle grade books or young adult ones. A big gap needs to get bridged here because we're losing readers at age 8 and sometimes we're losing them forever. I wrote for all ages, and I always say that I find writing for adolescents is the most challenging.
Sheikh Zayed Book. This podcast is produced in collaboration with the Sheikh Zayed Book Award. The Sheikh Zayed Book Award is one of the Arab world's most prestigious literary prizes, showcasing the stimulating and ambitious work of writers, translators, researchers, academics, and publishers advancing Arab literature and culture around the globe. Today's guest, Maria Dadouche, was awarded the Sheikh Zayed Book Award in 2022 in the category of children's literature for her novel Lughz el-Kura el-Zujajiyya, or The Mystery of the Glass Ball. Dadouche is a screenwriter and children's author from Syria who has published over 50 books. The Sheikh Zayed Book Award Translation Grant is open all year round, with funding available for titles that have won or been shortlisted for an award in the children's literature and literature categories. Publishers outside the Arab world are eligible to apply. Find out more on the Sheikh Zayed Book Award website at zayedaward.ae. That's ZAYEDAWARD.ae. Welcome to another episode of the Bulaq podcast. I'm Ursula Lindsay in Amman, Jordan. I'm joined as always by my co-host, Marcia Lynx Quayle in Rabat, Morocco. Hi.
Hi, Ursula.
And we have a special guest on this episode. The writer Maria Dadouche is joining us from Sunnyvale, California. Ms. Dadouche is the winner of the 2022 Sheikh Zayed Book Award in the category of children's literature for her book, The Mystery of the Glass Ball. We're thrilled that you can be with us today.
Thank you for hosting me, Ursula, and thank you for joining us, Marcia.
Yes, thank you so much, Maria. So just for those of you who are not familiar with her work, Maria Dadouche is an author and screenwriter based between the United States and Syria, who has published more than 50 books for young readers across a variety of genres and styles. She's received numerous awards, in addition to winning this year's SCBA for her fast-paced novel, The Mystery of the Glass Ball. She's also won a Claire Carmichael Scholarship for Fiction, a Qatar Prize for Arabic Novels, the Khalifa Award for Educational Creativity, the Schumann Award for Science Fiction, the Arab Publishers Forum Prize, and many more that I won't name, and as well as being featured on the Etisalat Prize shortlist. Dadouche's screenwriting includes work for the popular TV channel Spacetoon. She's also worked as editor-in-chief for the children's magazine Fulla, and she studied creative writing at UCLA. So thank you so much, Maria, for joining us today. It's such a pleasure to have you. I'm a big fan of many of your books. And it would be great if we could start out for readers just to talk a little bit about the story of The Mystery of the Glass Ball and how which begins with Ghassan getting on a train with his grandfather and finding this glass ball.
Oh, thank you, Marcia, for the introduction. And thank you for, I'm a big fan of your work as well. Marcia translates some of the well-known Arabic novels into English, beautiful translation. And let's talk about the crystal ball. It's an adventure that Ghassan and Sophia had two children, 10-year-old they were accidentally on the same train and heard two villains conspiring against the animal of the Arab desert, trying to poisoning them using the crystal ball, which is an innovation invented by Sophia's grandfather. So Sophia was more interested in saving the crystal ball, and Ghassan was more interested in saving the Arab deserts, which were something that his grandfather spent his whole life trying to save. And it's a journey on a train. Many people see this adventure as dedicated to animal life in the Arab desert, or it's like talked and tackled the sustainable energy because of the crystal ball, obviously. But I see it a story about friendship, because Ghassan is a typical Arabic child, or any child actually. He spends all the day in his room playing video games with the very same friends, and goes to school and have this routine and comfort zone. As opposed to Sophia, who has spent her life with her grandfather, moving, seeking, attending conferences, and not going to school, studying remotely with all kinds of friends. So they were very, very different. And when they first met, Sophia was open to their friendship and asked and said, so we have the same age, we're traveling with our grandfather. We heard accidentally the very same conspiracy. I wonder what other things that we have in common. And he said, so Hassan answered, believe me, this is the only things we have in common. This is the point where we start. This is where we started. And at the end, he literally took a bullet for her, which happily did not, the pistol was out of bullets. But he was ready to save her life and sacrifice his, and she did the same. And this is where so for me, it's a story about friendship. It's a nice, and, accepting, not having, there's this very important thing that I forgot to say. He was not ready to have her as a friend, because her mother is from Central America or South America, and she looked very differently. And this is why he could not, picture himself being a friend with such a different person with different background.
And we should say also that your story is set in the future, so they're riding a train.
Near future.
Yeah, and they're riding a train, and it's a sort of to the children, it's a strange experience to have paper tickets and be riding the train and things like this, because
that's right.
They're a little bit further along already in all of the developments that we already see technologically around us.
Mm-hmm.
If you could talk about, we'd love it if you could talk about your journey to writing literature for young people, and what brought you to writing literature for young people, and also what brings you to writing literature that for kids that set in the future, that has this kind of science fiction element to it.
Yeah, so this futuristic aspects in some of my stories tend to give extra powers to replace the old fashioned magic that that novels used to have before. So it's I think it's appealing. In this particular story, it was a near future. Because I wanted to make sure that the things that the Emirates or the Khalij laid seed for were had fruits. You know what I mean? They saw the fruit. In particular, I mentioned this water from the atmosphere, stratosphere, or some. I'm not sure about the name. Yeah, so it's a project that are being studied now. So I chose the near future in order to help children realize that it's the fruits are coming, and you know what I mean. Okay, so to answer the question about my journey and why do I keep writing for children, because I think stories are stories. They have powers. They attract people of all ages. Stories do not wait for you to write them or categorize them by age. They just sprout somewhere inside you and make their forthcoming footsteps noticeable as you listen to them approaching and finally get revealed under the spotlight. So if you ask me why do I write for young people or even for adults, my answer is I can't help it. Stories just eat you inside out. I keep saying this expression because they write themselves and come out whether you like it or not. And all I usually do is step aside, watch them mesmerized as they unfold. I keep writing for kids because I'm surrounded by them. And as I watch them, I feel that stories are babbling and bubbling inside my head.
That's a lovely image.
It is.
So I was also wondering, so there you are in Sunnyvale, California, and you studied writing at creative writing at UCLA, but the writers who are immediately around you, at least there in California, most of them I imagine are not writing in Arabic, they're writing in English. So I wondered about how you create and sustain a community of writers. Do you have a community of writers that you stay in touch with online? Do you share writing with other writers? How do you stay abreast of what's going on with children's literature and be a part of it?
So when I was studying at the university, we had sort of a cafe for writers to get together that was called A Room with a View. Obviously named after E.M. Foster's famous novel, A Room with a View. So we used to discuss there our stories for hours, sometimes days. Like, I'm not sure about the narrator, the POV, if I feel that inciting event wasn't strong enough, or if I fear the humor was silly, any kind of trouble, I'd head straight there for tips and help and fresh eyes. I miss that now after leaving school. But now instead, most of my fellow writers' friends were learners in my workshops. The reason why we became a community is that in the workshops, we developed sort of mutual vocab and common concepts because we've learned together the anatomy of stories. We find it easier to highlight together the weaker parts, appreciate the strong and beautiful ones. And but by the way, we still have our Facebook classroom pages open till this moment, and we get to meet there real often, and this is where we discuss what's going on in the literature world, in the Arab worlds. So I think even if I was sometimes I've spent long time, I do go to the Arab world maybe longer. I spend a longer time than I spend here, and I don't feel the difference really, because it's always the cyber world where we now connect with each other, right?
Do you also talk about your stories or your story ideas? You said you're surrounded by kids. Do you talk about them with kids? Because I do find Marsha and I just did an episode with our sons where we talked about a book that's written for children, for kids their age, and I do feel like I read these books with my son that there is a particular logic and a sensibility. Of course, like you say, stories are stories, and when you're reading a story with your kid, I'm also taken in by it. But children do have a particular sensibility. So do you talk about your story ideas with kids? Do you run things by them to kind of see how they react? Because I feel like certain things really work for children.
Yeah. Well, first, I still have, when I started this writing journey, my son was only 9-year-old. So I think as he grew up, I sort of mastered and took notes of everything that he was concerned about or admired or reacted to. And also he was my alpha reader, and so were his friends. And I took very seriously what they had to add or change. I almost complied with all they said. So I think without having children your alpha readers, I think you can never be sure if this is going to work or not.
Yeah, I think also it would be great to know, what they think is funny too. Because many of your books have this sense of fun and humor, and as you point out, the near future environment of this book, The Mystery of the Crystal Ball or The Mystery of the Glass Ball, is a kind of in many ways, a positive near future environment. It's about different technology and things that don't exist now but could exist in the near future, such as taking water out of the troposphere. But you also have other books where science fiction takes a kind of a darker turn, like in I Want Golden Eyes. It has science fictional elements that show a possible dystopic view against which the main character needs to kind of fight. And I wondered, just in general, what your inspirations were in taking on science fiction, if you were a fan of science fiction, or how did you come to those choices?
Well, yeah, I think science fiction is my drink. I like it because it, really, I like it because it allows me to shed light on the coming trouble that has seeds now, and to criticize the privileged strata of the society, and the ones who have the power, without really offending anyone. Futuristic world is always appealing as a setting to teenagers, and the power of technology, as I just said, substitutes the role of magic and fantasia. Besides, I've read a lot of Ahmed Tawfiq's work. And also Nabil Farouk. I remember some of his novels. So we were brought up reading and watching sci-fi movies. I think this is how I became a big fan of the genre.
Yeah, I think because there is Ahmed Khalid Tawfiq and Nabil Farouk were so important, I actually am maybe surprised that there is not more science fiction for young readers in Arabic now.
Well, I think there is, but it's really complicated now, because we in Syria had what was his name? He's a very Talib Umran. He's a very well-known author, and wrote maybe 50 or 60 novel about science fiction. But they all handled or spoke about old-fashioned sci-fi subjects like aliens and like the robots. But now things have changed. They have a very different factors to talk about, like solar punk, that's like seeking sustainable energy, or like most they would. I think what everyone wanna read about now is biopolitics. I mean, the use of social engineering or politic engineering by the state, using DNA obligations, or discriminating people, like the way things were in Golden Eyes, and also the new media and language, the big data. I mean the algorithms, the machine in the machines we use every day, and who's watching us, and it's also subjects like cybersecurity, surveillance, facial recognition. All these things now are more. They have different. They add a different definition to the sci-fi literature, and this is where we need to write now, I think. So if we get to do this, this genre will be more appealing than than aliens who used to want to like invade Earth, and this is a bit becoming old-fashioned kind. Yeah.
Yeah. And Maria, let me just ask you a quick question. Your stories, I've read two excerpts. One is set in the Comoros Islands, and one is set in the Gulf. I'm not sure what country they're traversing, because I just read the beginning of this the mystery of the crystal ball. Are your stories also set in other places? I mean, do you move around and set them in all sorts of parts, or do you have particular locations where they're usually set? I mean, besides that they're in the future, I'm asking geographically also, where are they?
Yeah, geographically, well, I remember the كوكب لا معقول, or the planet of absurdities, was located in Syria, in Lebanon. But I think the rest of my books don't have this particular geographic place.
Okay, so it's not. So that is also sort of left to the reader's imagination.
Yes. Well, sometimes when I first wrote the Zift al-Abyad novel, which which talked about addiction, White Tar is the translation of the title. It was first meant to take place in Amman, but it coincided that the week we had to release the book, this Netflix show started playing about addiction in Amman, and that caused sort of people were very much offended by it. They just wouldn't acknowledge this problem in their society. So we had to change the setting, and we made it more of the generic. And this is how publishers prefer it. Although I really feel more comfortable talking about a particular place, and even if I don't mention the name of places, I tend to locate my stories in a particular world. I use this same food and geography and clothes, and even the way they talk, and I end up deleting all the true places names and changing them. But I feel more comfortable, having a particular setting in my mind.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's true also of some adult science fiction and speculative fiction that I've read, like it may not name the country, but the setting is actually recognizable. I mean, it's very evocative of a particular place, usually somewhere that the writer knows well and that you recognize. I mean, I'm thinking Basma Abdelaziz, I don't think actually says anywhere in her books that they're set in Egypt, but you
just know it.
recognize the Egyptian setting. Yeah. And that's actually a nice effect, I think, in writing.
So I wanted to ask you, for me, sometimes I have a hard time finding what new books are coming out for young readers that they aren't covered in the newspapers and the magazines in the same way that books for grown-up readers are. There are some places that review books like Hedi Bedi, but that I still have a hard time knowing where new good books are. And I wanted to know how you find out about what's going on with Arabic literature for young readers, and how do you let people know about your new books? Are you doing Zoom events, or are you classroom visits, or how do you get the word out about new books?
So yes, a good start is the Hadi Badi, or the people who review the work, as you mentioned. And also there's these well-known publishers who usually, when you buy their work, you're sure that this work had passed many filters and is supposed to be, a good work of literature or art. But usually, I'm sorry to say that maybe it's not a matter of how difficult we can find good books, but more of not having many good adolescent books in Arabic in the first place. I have to acknowledge that the abundance of good novels for adults or of good picture books is there in the Arab world, but I'm afraid I can't say the same about middle grade books or young adult ones. A big gap needs to get bridged here, because we're losing readers at age 8, and sometimes we're losing them forever. I wrote for all ages, and I always say that I find writing for adolescents is the most challenging. Let me tell you why. In my opinion, children who read picture books are supposedly age 7 or younger. They're still first graders. They know little about life and the world around them. They take most of what us adults say as facts and truths, and they trust their knowledge. I mean, adults' knowledge. On the contrary, children between 7 and 12, they still know little about the world, but have more confidence and experience to adapt the Mr. Know-it-all attitude.
I'm laughing because this is very familiar to me.
Yes. So how does that affect writers? Well, simply we need to outsmart them, meaning that we obviously need to respect their intelligence, which is, of course, a prerequisite, and a needed element for writing for all ages. But in addition to that, we need to disguise our wisdom with subtle clues for adolescents to find out and to decipher and make their own findings at the aha moment, which give them the satisfaction. So that's really a challenge. And another one is the faster paced plot. Especially with this, with the shorter attention span that social media caused, and also the humor, the big challenge. The jokes should not at all look like daddy's joke. Daddy's joke. Yeah, and last, and maybe the last and not least, the voice, a true voice to the middle grade child, which is the ultimate challenge, because in chapter books or adolescence novels, we obviously are free of the 500 word limit most picture books impose. And we have the luxury to go inside our protagonists' heads, unfold their thoughts and fears and wishes. We need to do this in their own naive way of thinking and expressing, and that's what I call a true challenge. So
I totally agree that this young middle grade, especially 8, 9, and 10, there's definitely not enough being published in that area. So, but why do you think that is?
Yeah, I've just mentioned because it's really difficult. I for one find this the most challenging age to write to. I find it way easier to write a picture book or an adult novel or even a young adult novel than middle grade literature. I think we only have the series of Taym and Sami and series of Karima Karamil and series of Ahmed Al-Aqad for this age. We have, individual books here and there,
right?
But yeah, it's a strong need.
I'm wondering about the balance when you're writing about something that you want to have some kind of a positive impact or some issue that you want to raise with young readers, say, freedom and autonomy or, inequality like in Golden Eyes or the environment. How do you balance that with not being moralizing or preachy or turning the young reader off because they feel you're telling them lecturing to them?
Yeah, so I guess preachy is when you take a spoonful of advice and you feed it to the reader. Non-preachy is when you let your main characters learn from their own mistakes and their bad decisions. When I wrote The White Tar, which, as I mentioned, a novel about drugs, I let the camera accompany the hero, Kinan was his name, in his journey while using, without any comments. I allowed the readers to do the math, do their own assessments, and come up with their own findings only by watching Kinan. So this is my way of adding a value to my book. By the way, all books should have a value, even if they're light and digestive. And what you think could be very humorous and comedy, it still has a value promoted, but maybe too subtly to be like to really pinpoint.
Is there anything particular, like characteristic, I guess, of Arabic children's literature compared to children's literature in other languages?
Well, there is the Arab world particularities, the challenges our children face. Like if we're talking about girls, then we're talking about mostly a dominant male in the family that has the final say in her decisions. And there is the particularity of course, poverty in most of many places, and the setting, the dry weather mostly, and old-fashioned kind of schools. That's the things I can think of now. But of course, writing for Arabic children has its own challenges. And also there is this censorship, because children do appreciate, like let's say toilet humor, but your publishers are always against this, and you need to fight in order to have them accept. Sometimes they just don't. And also like you wouldn't believe it, the antagonist in the White Tar was originally a girl, but then my friend Abir, who is my publisher, the publisher of this book, said that there is no way in the world anyone would accept an antagonist, like the bad guy, to be a girl going and market and selling drugs in the schools, and going and using at night. So let's make it a boy, a young man. And this is how we ended up like changing the whole entire novel from her perspective to his perspective, and she would change the name. So yes, writing in the Arab world has its own challenges. I'm not sure if I answered your question, Marsha.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And also, I'm curious that you write the book first, and then you decide which publisher you want to go with, and how do you decide which publisher you want to work with, and to what extent the publisher is influencing and editing the book before it comes out?
Well, I worked so far with almost 10 publishers, and my experience with them all was great. But it's always me writing the entire work first, and then they get to read it and they get to give me comments, and we do the edits. So it's never like us working together throughout the process. I wish to get to do that sometimes. I once was in a writing retreat upstate New York, and I had a friend whose publisher used to come to spend every Sunday with us. And I used to like watch them working and under the tree, and I envied them, because you never get to do this in the Arabic world. So yeah, maybe this happens when you contract for a book before, but when this it's an idea inside the publisher's head, and then he contracts you to write it. I think this is when this happened, but usually things work vice versa. It's usually we writers have this idea and we write them, and then we submit them to the publishers.
And does this category of young adult that has is huge in Western publishing and movies and everything, has that like arrived within the Arabic publishing world? I mean, that it's not just children's literature and adult literature, but these sort of subcategories now. Is that a genre that is sort of people are aware of or developing?
I think prizes, if I get it right, prizes are opening eyes about new kind of genres, like Schumann, when issued the prize, the award of science fiction, or some. I think there are awards that want us to talk about historical novel, or journey novel, or fantasia. What else? I think awards. Awards is the dynamo in the Arab world, because obviously with people not being able to buy books and all the hardships and challenges publishers face, and writers and illustrators and everyone, the only reason why anyone would write or publish or invest any energy or money in this. It's not the only reason. I mean, it can be a very good reason for us to work. So if in a word, say I want a novel about science fiction, this is where all writers will go and do their best.
Yeah, there did seem to be a while where there were, I think it was the Anna Lind Foundation supported some awareness and prizes for picture books with protagonists with disabilities, and suddenly I saw a lot more picture books with protagonists with disabilities.
Yeah.
And yes, with Sowt Award and Sheikh Zayed and Showman, the prizes definitely I see as driving development of different genres, which is not quite the same as having a fully thriving industry where people are buying them and they're being adapted to films and that.
Well, because ideally what would be also driving it is that you have the readership, this young adult readership that I'm sure, like that Maria, you talked about, that's so critical. That's the age where kids sort of either become lifelong readers or maybe don't.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully there's that too, that is more like, you know, really engaging books that are thoughtfully written for that age are put out there, that public grows, and that also publishers see that there is, right, that those readers to be cultivated, hopefully.
Right, yeah. Especially young readers of potty humor. I think publishers should accept this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Maria, I want to thank you again very, very much for joining us on this episode, and congratulate you again on your win. And any of your writing that is available in English, we'll make sure to link to in the show notes, and in Arabic, of course.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Marsha, and thank you, Ursula, for hosting me. It's been really a pleasure. I just wanted to add one last small point.
Please.
Yeah. I think platforms that have books, like there are very few now, maybe less than 10, but they solve a big problem financially for readers and for publishers, because they made our books more available for just a monthly subscription, or maybe annual one. Maybe the annual subscription is less than the price of one book, but the platform hosts maybe 500 books. So you get access to 500 books in the price for one book. And this made a huge difference in the readership. Like I see, let's say one of my books were read 120,000 times. Had it been published by paper, maybe it would have only be read for 1,000 or 2,000 times. So platforms are making a difference, and I'm very optimistic about them. Maybe there will come a day where we see children have come across most of the good books available in the Arabic literature world. So yeah, and thank you again for hosting me. It was really a pleasure and an honor, and I hope we get to do this again.
Yes, thank you, Maria. And I certainly hope that these electronic platforms spread more and more.
Thank you. Goodbye, and goodbye to all our listeners. We'll be back in a couple weeks as usual. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Bye-bye.